Welcome. This is our 9th program of this season. We started in March and we are ending in November. And so I think that makes either 35 or 36 altogether that we've had over the years. So I'm very happy to see all of you here. Somebody said you better get more chairs for this program, and we had them available. We just didn't put them out. We've had wonderful, wonderful speakers. On the way down with our speaker tonight, I was reminiscing about a few of them that we had. And all of them had individual stories to tell. And each one was touching or funny or enlightening or, just break your heart kind of thing sometimes. So they've been wonderful. But I want to say something else here tonight, because what we've had here over these 4 years, along with our wonderful speakers, we've had outstanding audiences. We've had people that are interested, people that are sensitive, people that are attentive, people that have come and have been overwhelmed by some of the stories, and they've shared with me and everybody else around them. And I just really want to thank you for that. And along with that vein, we've had some kids. We've had a teacher who has encouraged them to come, and I don't want to know how he encouraged them. Whatever the way he did it, he got them here, and he's the only one. And that's Dave Kinsey in the back. Yeah. And I got to tell you, his kids that he's brought have been great audience. They've been kind of curious in their questions, things that I thought everybody would know. Of course, they don't know. How would they know? They're just kids. Well, they're older kids, but they didn't live through this time. So they have no idea what was going on. So I'd like you to give them a round of applause too, all the kids that have come. And thank you so much for being here. Our speaker tonight is Mrs. Betty Gold. I have written a whole big long introduction of which she does not want me to use any of my flowery words. But I want you to know that she's well known in the area. She has shared her story many times. And it's her wish tonight to continue to shed light on one of those darkest moments in history. She was a survivor of those times, and so her story is unique. At the end of the program, if you feel so inclined, there's a jar back there for donations for a documentary that's being made about her hometown in Poland. And I'm sure there'll be more talked about that during her presentation. So I'd like to introduce Mrs. Betty Gold.
Is this working okay?
Yep, you should be on.
Okay. Good evening. What a nice turnout. The veterans never disappoint me. Really. Thank you for having me. It's my pleasure being here. And I will get to the point. My name is Betty Gold, and I'm a Holocaust survivor. And I'm going to tell you briefly about my experiences during the Holocaust. I mean, I could speak to you for months and wouldn't be able to describe it, because there just isn't enough pen, paper, or ink on the planet to describe it. No matter what you read or what you see or what you hear, it doesn't come close to it. But it's history, we have to teach it. I was born in a very small town in eastern Poland, and it was a very unique town because it consisted of Jews only. It's the only town on the planet outside of Palestine at that time that consisted of Jews only. 5,000 Jews, one Christian family, the postmistress and her son. And the reason we had a Christian postmistress is because a Jew was not allowed to be a postmaster or a postmistress. So they brought in a lovely Christian lady from the big city. And she gave birth to a little boy in our town at the same time I was born, which is 81 years ago. And we lived next door to each other practically. So this little boy who was Christian thought he was Jewish because he grew up with Jewish kids only. He spoke Yiddish. He went to Hebrew school with us, and but he allowed us to celebrate Christmas with him. So we shared holidays. Anyway, it was a very wonderful little place to grow up in. And it was a very small knit community. Everybody was either a neighbor or a relative. And you knew everyone by their first names, you know. Little town, very religious community. People, we never saw a gun. We never had any crime. We never saw a car. No technology, you know. We lived like obscure, you know. We were hidden from the world, so to speak. And life was okay. We had land. We planted our own fruits and vegetables. We had 3 factories. We had a glass factory, a leather factory, and a flour mill. We also had dairies, and we had retail. We had schools and teachers up to the 8th grade. After you finished 8th grade, you had to go to gymnasium, which is high school. And if you could afford it, your parents would have to send you to the big city because we didn't have it in our town. And so I stopped at the age of, 11. That was my education at that time, because the war started. And life was pretty good. It was a great little community. I wish it had existed. Until World War II. And then we heard rumors that Jews are being killed in the big cities in Poland, in Western Poland. But you know, being such a tiny community and sort of not very knowledgeable about what's going on in the world, we were in denial. When I say we, I'm talking about my parents, my grandparents, that generation. They didn't think that the Nazis would bother wasting their time coming to such a little town and killing innocent, nice people. And so it went. In the meantime, my father had an idea, just in case it's true. He thought he would build a hiding place for his family. We had a shed in the back of our house. It was very narrow and long. And he decided to buy plywood and build a false wall, like from one end to the other, wide enough for a person to stand up. In addition to that, he and an adult cousin of his went to the forest, which was very nearby. We lived near the forest. And they dug 2 bunkers. So in case we survive in the wall, we'll have a place to hide in the forest. And this was all set and ready in case they come to kill us. And for a while, they didn't bother us very much. And then they started to take some men for slave labor, and when they didn't return, we got the message. We realized it's bad news. But we didn't know what to do. We couldn't defend ourselves. So we waited to see what happens, and eventually they surrounded our town. They knocked on our doors, and they told us that we have to leave our homes. And we were allowed to take necessities only. So we figured if they're allowing us to take necessities, they're going to keep us alive. Otherwise, why would we need it? So we were happy. And they figured that they're taking us to a ghetto. I'm sure you all know what that is, where they bring all the Jews in one place so they can kill them. So we were waiting, and I was the first one at the door when they came to my house. And I was there with my grandmother, my father's mother, and we were the first ones to walk out, and I walked with her. And we came to a certain spot near the forest, and we were told to sit there until further instructions. And I sat there with my grandmother with the bundles, and I was watching all the people coming because it took a few hours till everybody came to the ghetto. And I'm looking and looking, and I was looking for my parents, my 2 brothers, and I didn't see them. And I became very anxious and nervous and scared. I thought, something might have happened to them. So I told my grandmother, you sit and watch the bundles. I'm going to risk it. I'm going to take a chance. I'm going to go in the opposite direction of the rifles and the Nazis, and I'm going to go and look for my family and see if they're okay. Well, I was very tiny, I was only 11, and I was quick on my feet, and somehow I managed to wiggle my way through, and I came to the house. I looked in the house and there was no one there. And then I remembered the wall. I walked in the shed. I didn't know where it was because my parents wouldn't tell me in case I'll tell the whole city, so there was not enough room for everybody. So I walked in the shed, I identified myself, and I said, I just ran away from the ghetto looking for you. If you are in the wall, tell me so. There's no response. They didn't respond to me because they thought someone had followed me. And if a Nazi or a enabler followed me, there were 15 people in the wall. They would all get killed. So it was better to sacrifice one little girl. I started to cry and plead and beg, and I told them, I also want to live, please. Please let me in. And finally, I assured him that no one followed me, and that did the trick. And then a little door opened in the corner by the wall, and an arm reached out, and I reached for the arm, and I was pulled inside. It was my older brother who pulled me inside. Now we were 16 people in the wall. And we were instructed to be very quiet, not to talk, not to sneeze, not to cough, just be very silent, because the Nazis were roaming around in the courtyards looking for hidden Jews. So if they would hear us, we'd be killed, naturally. Well, we understood the kids follow directions. We were very, very quiet. Among the 16 people in the wall, there was a family who had 2 boys, the ages of 6 and 4, and a little girl, a baby, about 1.5 years. And suddenly that baby started to cry. And we were certain that they're all going to die because the Nazis are going to hear the baby's cries. But there was nothing we could do. And suddenly the mother made a horrific decision. She decided that she wanted to save her 2 little boys and consequently the rest of us. She suffocated her baby to death. We had a piece of burlap in the wall. We wrapped the baby and put it on the ground. And we were grieving and sad and disturbed. And it was a horrible experience for little kids like us, the rest of us. We thought that should we by accident cough or sneeze or make a sound, they'll do the same thing to us. So it was a terrible experience to witness. Well, we were sitting in the wall. In the meantime, we didn't know what's going to happen with the people in the ghetto. It wasn't that far from us, because it was a tiny town. It was near the forest. And we could look out and see certain things because there were little cracks in the plywood. And we were waiting, and suddenly we heard shots. And it sounded like a war, like World War II. And what happened? They killed all the Jews in the ghetto. Out of the 5,000, they killed 4,200. The rest managed to run, and the bullets didn't hit them. They made them dig their own mass grave. They made them undress each other. They made them walk in one layer at a time, and they gunned them down. The earth was shaking. People were still buried alive. They were wounded only. And we're sitting in that hole in the wall. And we didn't know what we're going to do. We waited till nightfall. And we were blessed with a rainstorm so we could run away. because the rain created a lot of noise between the shrubs and the trees, and the rain itself is noisy. So when it got dark and the rain came along, we all crawled out of the wall on our hands and knees, and we were crawling until it was a safe spot to stand up. We stood up and we ran towards the forest, and we crawled into the first bunker. Now the bunker was small. If one person turned around, we all had to turn around. It was high, and we were able to sit up in the bunker. And it was on the ground, and the entrance was like the size of the seats of the chairs you're sitting on, covered with twigs and leaves so it wouldn't be noticeable. And to get in and out, we just lifted it up. So we were in that bunker, and that's where we lived. It was August 1942. And it was warm, so it wasn't so bad. We ran away just with the summer clothes on our back. We had nothing else. And as long as it was warm, it didn't affect us much. And there was another problem. After a few days, we became hungry. What do you do about food in the forest? Well, the elders had a meeting, and they decided that they can't allow the boys or the men to go out scrounging for food. Why? According to the Jewish religion, every male that is born is circumcised at the 8th day. And if a boy or a man would go out scrounging for food and someone would spot him, they would ask him to disrobe. And if they were circumcised, they'd kill him on the spot. Okay? That's how it was. Then the women and the children remained. Now, no offense, but in those days, in our little town in Europe, the women were kind of zaftig. You know what that means? A little heavy set. So why? Because it showed that the husband was prosperous, that they had enough meat and potatoes to eat or whatever they were eating. So it was a lot of calories. And the women were pretty heavy. So they thought that it wouldn't be safe for the women to go out. They're too large, they'll be noticed. So who's there left? Who's left? The children. I was the only girl, and it was safer for the girl than for the boys. Well, my mother had a cloth that she ran away with, some kind of tablecloth. She tied it around my waist and around my neck and formed a pouch. And I would go out. They decided that I would be the provider. They appointed me. So I would go out at night only. And where would I get my food? I would steal from farms, which was great. I'd dig up a cabbage, beets, carrots, whatever I could find, and put it in the what is it? The pouch until it was full. And I'd bring it back to the bunker, and we would ration it. And we'd have a little piece or a little bit once a day and save the rest so I wouldn't have to risk my life every night. And that's how we lived. At the same time, we were very, very fortunate that my father had a wonderful Christian friend with whom he did business at home. And he was the only one who knew where we were hiding. He trusted him completely. And this man would come occasionally, like every 2 weeks, 3 weeks or so, and he would bring us a little food. And what was very important to us is that he was our bulletin. He would let us know what's going on in the world, what's happening, because we were hidden in the bunker, we didn't know what's going on. We only know day and light, we didn't know anything else. So please know that this man risked his life and his family's life to help a Jew during the Holocaust. Those are the Christians that we call righteous Christians, those who helped Jews during the Holocaust. There is a memorial in Jerusalem, and all the righteous Christians' names are inscribed there, including our friend Yusuf. And that's where we lived, and he would come occasionally, then disappear, and we couldn't wait till he come back. And one day he came and he said, you know, you're not the only survivors. There are some others. They were hiding in different places, maybe Christian homes in the forest, or who knows where. He says many of them came back and they're in town. They're doing slave labor for the Nazis in the factories, in the 3 factories. Now mind you that when they killed the Jews in town, they burned the homes to the ground. The only thing that was left are the 3 factories and 2 houses on the outskirts. And he says, they went back, they're living in the 2 houses, and they're doing labor for the Nazis. And we thought it was such a great idea. We'll have shelter, we'll have a soup kitchen maybe, we won't be so hungry. And we got together and we decided to do the same thing and join the rest of them. So we walked at night, it was always at night. And we walked and walked and walked and walked in circles. We got lost. I want you to know that my parents, my grandparents and great-grandparents were born in that little town. It's a little town where people were born, people lived and worked and died there. Nobody ever left. And they knew their way around for hundreds of miles. And that night, they couldn't find their way to town, to the 2 houses. We were exhausted already from walking. And finally, there was a ditch. And my father said, everybody into the ditch. We're going to rest up and wait until daylight, till dawn. And we'll find our way to the houses. We were so glad to get in there and rest up. We were sitting there quietly, dozing maybe, and waiting for daylight. And while we are waiting, we heard shots again. And what happened? While we were sitting in the ditch, they killed the rest of the Jews who came back to town to do slave labor. Now, if we hadn't gotten lost, I wouldn't be here with you lovely people. It was a miracle and a tragedy. So what are we supposed to do now? We turned around and we went back to the forest. We couldn't go to the first bunker because when we left the cover of the bunker open. We put it aside someplace, threw it aside. So we were worried that it may have been discovered. But we had another bunker about a mile away. So we ran to the second bunker and we crawled in there. And by that time it was winter, it was getting cold, really cold. And things were beginning to get pretty rough. We were cold, we were hungry, we had lice that we kept scratching our bodies and hair. And sometimes we would bleed. My father had a dull knife and he would cut a few strands at a time, our hair off. And things were pretty bad. But I don't know what makes people want to live. And we stayed there during the winter. And one day, I was lucky. It was hard to get food because the earth was frozen. I couldn't get any food at the farms. So I would go to the villagers, to the farmers' barns inside, and sometimes I'd find a little wheat or flour. I'd bring it back. We'd mix it up with a little water from a puddle in the forest and eat it and then throw up. And sometimes they had like wooden garbage containers. I would stick my hand in at night and try to feel what might be edible. A piece of meat, an apple, a piece of bread, and I would pull out everything that I thought was edible, put it in the pouch, bring it back, and we would share the garbage, and that's how we continued living. One night, I walked into a barn, and I saw a miracle happen. There was a little table. And now the table, there were 3 loaves of bread. Now, it doesn't mean much to us today, does it? We don't even want to eat it, it's fattening. We could go to Giant Eagle and buy 100 loaves of bread. But at that time, to us, it meant a matter of life and death, or death. I grabbed those 3 loaves of bread. I ran to the bunker, and when I crawled in, everyone's eyes were bulging out. Where in the heck did you get 3 loaves of bread? They couldn't wait to devour it. And my father said, not so fast. Everyone's going to get a little piece once a day. So it would last for a couple weeks, and his little daughter wouldn't have to risk her life every night. Well, he gave us each a little piece, and the rest was stored by the wall. He'd made a special little shelf that he dug there to house the breads. My space in the bunker was next to the breads by that wall at the end. Well, that night I thought to myself, I am the one who goes out there and risks her life. I am keeping them alive. If it weren't for me, they die. I think I deserve a little extra. What did I do? I poked a hole in one of the loaves of bread, and I treated myself. I wasn't satisfied. I poked one more hole, and I stopped at that. In the morning, my father looked around, and he said, oh my God, in addition to the cold, the misery, the hunger, and being so frightened of death, now we have rats. Well, there's nothing you can do about rats in the bunker. If we catch one, we probably eat it. I kept my mouth shut. I didn't say a word. I didn't take any part in that conversation. The following night, believe it or not, I was naughty again, and I did the same thing. But I promised myself that I won't do it again. And the following morning again, my father looked around and he said, oh my God, maybe we should eat up the breads. Take a look, there are 4 holes in there. Maybe we should eat them up before the rats do. I kept quiet again. And before he made a decision what to do, he kind of looked around and looked around. He couldn't decide, should we eat up the bread or not eat up the bread? And suddenly he started staring at me for some reason. I guess he knew his daughter. And he kept staring and staring, and the longer he stared at me, the more frustrated I became, and I was kind of scared, and I don't know. And I put my head down, I didn't look up, and you looked at me, and you made an announcement, and you said, hey everybody, I found the rat. He pulled me over from one end of the bunker to the other, and the breads were safe for a while. A little humor. I tell this story in memory of my father because he loved to tell the story after the Holocaust about his daughter, the rat who stole bread. So that's why I talk about that. And that's how we existed. One fine day, a wonderful Christian came, and he said, I have very bad news for you. You were discovered. You must run away immediately. They're coming to kill you. It's winter. It's like 0 outside or colder, who knows. We had no clothes, we had no blanket, we had nothing. If we'd stand in the forest, we'd freeze to death. We didn't have any more bunkers to go to. We didn't know what to do. We didn't know where to go. Then my father remembered that about 1.5 miles from us, there was another bunker with 11 hidden Jews, neighbors, relatives. He says, we'll go there, they'll let us in, and when the Nazis come to kill us and they find an empty bunker, it'll be safe to come back. Fine. Got organized. We're walking towards the bunker where the 11 Jews are hiding. My father came there, he opened the cover, he identified himself, and he told them our story. And they said, Eli, that was my father's name, if there's room, you are all welcome. There were 15 of us. My father looked in. Our bunker was a mansion compared to theirs. Why? Because we could sit up, they couldn't. They were lying flat. Even if we'd want to lie on top of them, there was no room. That's how shallow it was. And there wasn't room for an arm or a leg. There was nothing we could do. Well, by that time, we were so distraught, we were so hungry, we were so cold, we were so miserable, we were skin and bones. And suicide became a very attractive option. And the elders decided that we're going to go back to the bunker, let the Nazis come and kill us and get it over with. It's enough suffering. Can't take it anymore. We went back to the bunker, and we stayed in the bunker, and everyone was sad, of course. We were grieving for ourselves. And my father tried to comfort us. He says, well, at least we'll meet in heaven because we already had hell on earth. And everybody kissed and hugged and quieted down, and then we were waiting for the Nazis. And finally we heard the footsteps. My younger brother's space was next to the opening of the bunker. And my father said, Bernie, take a look who's there, as though we didn't know. We knew that the Nazis are coming to kill us. Bernie opened up the cover, he looked out. He turned around and he was smirking. He was laughing. And we thought, gee, the kid flipped his lid. He saw the Nazis, he got scared, and he went crazy. It happened. Well, the reason he was smirking is because instead of the Nazis, it was a friendly Christian. He came to tell us that there was an error. We were not the ones who were discovered. There was 11 Jews in the other bunker. Now, if they would have had room for us, again, I'll repeat myself, I wouldn't be with you here tonight. So another tragedy and miracle happened. What do we do now? Since we were not discovered, my father decided it's safe to go back to the bunker. And we went back to the bunker. We stayed in the bunker. And it was winter, and it was cold, and it was really tough. And we stayed over the winter, almost 2 years. And then summer came, which helped us. And we didn't know what to do or what to wait. And at that time, we our Christian friend came one day, and he said to us, to my father especially, I want to remind you of something. I know you know the difference between day and night, but I don't know if you know what date it is or anything like that. We didn't know. He says, I want to remind you that in 5 days from today is your holiest day of the Jewish religion, Yom Kippur, Day of Atonement. It's a day where every Jew goes to the synagogue, prays, and fasts. Well, we thanked him, and we had to decide what to do in the next couple days. And my father thought that by now, since the town was burned to the ground, the Jews were killed, there's nothing there, why would anybody be there? It would be safe maybe to go in the 2 houses on the outskirts and pray there. So again, at night, we went to the 2 houses. This time we didn't get lost. We came there, and to our surprise, we found about 95 survivors from our town. And we were so happy to find out that we were not the only ones that are alive. And we kibitzed, and we talked, and embraced, and hugged, and kissed, and then in the morning we got ready to pray. And the Nazis were so clever. They were so smart. They knew all our traditions. They knew everything about our religion and our lifestyles and everything. They too decided to join us, but not in prayer. They came to kill us. They started shooting. and we started running again. We were always on the run. We jumped out of doors and windows and just kept running. And we ran. My father always told us, when somebody catches you, run. Let them shoot you. It's an easier death. Because when the Nazis or some enablers would find a Jew in the forest hiding, they wouldn't kill him. They wouldn't shoot him. It's an easy death. They would torture them. They would cut women's breasts off, people's tongues out, and ears off, and limbs. We witnessed that. Once in a while, we'd crawl out at night and we'd see a body hanging without limbs. We'd take it down and bury it as best as we could. And he didn't want us to be tortured, so he always told us, run. Whenever you get caught, run. Okay. So they started shooting at us, and it was raining bullets. And I jumped out of a window. And to my left, I noticed that my rabbi, who was dead, his body was lying on the ground, but he had a beautiful white beard, and they set it on fire. I saw my uncle lying there with a slit throat and reaching out for help. I ran over children's bodies and kept running. And remember the mother who suffocated her little girl to save her two boys? They were gunned down that morning too. So they had no more children. Out of the original 16 people in the wall, 8 of us survived. And we came back to the forest. We always had a designated spot where to meet if we separate. And we were waiting to see who's going to show up. And half of us showed up. It was summer. It was the end of summer, but it was still very warm. And that helped. But we didn't have any hiding place anymore. No more bunkers. We couldn't walk around in the forest because it's summer. A lot of people and shepherds and are all over the place. Will be noticed in no time. And we didn't have where to hide. Then my father, excuse me, I keep referring to my father because he was the oldest of the group. He made all the decisions, and whatever he said went. He was the leader of the group. And my father got an idea. He said, you know, there's only one place that we might have a chance to survive. And there is a swamp deep in the forest. I don't think the Nazis will dirty their beautiful designer uniforms to look for a few filthy Jews in a swamp. It was waist high in vegetation and mud, and it was awful. Well, how do you live in a swamp? Well, we walked in deep into the swamp, and the man built a bridge like this, like a table, above the water. From fallen trees and twigs and leaves, and that's where we lived, on that bridge. I called it a bridge. And we even had a pet. We had a little snake. We called it It. It amused us. It left, it came, it left, it came. It was lucky we didn't eat it up. But, you know, that was our entertainment. And that's how we lived, on the bridge. And by that time, we were like really skeletons. Our clothes were in shreds, no shoes. We were filthy dirty. If someone would see us, they would run away from us. They'd be so scared. We looked like wild animals in the jungle. And we didn't know if the war was over or not because we lost contact with our friendly Christian when we went to the swamp. He didn't know where we went. And we had no idea what's going on in the outside world. The war may have been over and we didn't know, maybe. But we couldn't take a chance and go out and ask somebody because if it's not over, they'll kill us. So we waited. And that's how we lived, and it was very difficult for me to go out and get food for everyone because food, garbage I'm referring to, because I would find my way to the village because I could see the twinkling lights. There was no electricity. They had gas lamps. But coming back was a problem. The swamp was so vast. I didn't know if I go to the right, to the left, to the center, and I had a problem. So we set up a signal. I would clap 3 times. They would clap back to me. I would follow the sound and find my way to the bridge with a little bit of food garbage or whatever I dug up there. And that's how we lived. That's how we existed in the jungle. One day, my father had a bright idea. He was really a very smart man, I think. He said, you know, to the few little kids that still survived, I'm going to take you on a field trip. Now, you students have been on field trips, right? Well, I was waiting. We were rolling our eyes. Where's he going to take us in the swamp on a field trip? And then he said, we didn't want to go. And then he said, I'll take you to the end of the forest. We're going to look out. It was a beautiful sunny day. And maybe we'll see humanity. Maybe we'll see an animal or something. It'll be like going to the zoo. Now that appealed to us. We marched and followed my father to the end of the forest. We looked out, and sure enough, we saw farmers working the land. We saw ladies helping the farmers. We saw children running around. We saw horses and cows and roosters and dogs. And everybody was free. And how we stood there with such envy that the farmer can work the land. The children are free to run around, and so were the animals. And we were doomed to die. And we couldn't be free. And we just stood there with great envy, and there was nothing we could do. My father said, look quickly, we can't stay here too long. We don't want to take a chance of being discovered. And in the meantime, my younger brother points at something, and he says, oh, I think I see an orchard. We were always so hungry. Hunger was the worst part of trying to survive. There's no such pain as hunger. When you go 4, 5, 6 days without food, we wanted to die. That's how bad it was. That was the worst part. We weren't afraid of anything else, even dying. So when he saw an orchard, he figured, oh, I'll find some fruit, probably. He took off, and before my parents could stop him, he took off and he ran towards the orchard, and we saw a bed down and picked some things, obviously fruit. And we were praying for his safe return because we were afraid he'll be noticed and they'll kill him. And we were praying and waiting for him, and suddenly we saw 3 horses with 3 soldiers, uniformed soldiers, and rifles on their back. They approached my brother. They picked him up and put him on a horse. And surely they asked him, who are you? What are you doing here? Who are you with? Well, he was a kid. He was scared. He told them. And before we knew it, we saw the horses running towards us. Well, we started to run real fast. And we discovered that horses run much faster than people. And before you knew it, they surrounded us. And the greatest miracle happened. Instead of them being the Nazis, it was the Russian underground, the fighters, veterans. They were blowing up bridges, railroad tracks, buildings, fighting the Nazi in the background. And they would go from village to village, from city to city, but from forest to forest, and they took us with them. And they gave my older brother a rifle and my father a rifle. He didn't know what to do with it. And they told him, go fight. I don't think he ever ever used a gun. He wouldn't even know how. And my mother and I were cooks. Like, they would bring food. It became easier for us. We weren't so hungry because they would go into a village, confiscate food and clothing. So we finally got to eat something. And that's how we lived with them for about 5.5 months. Then they sent my father away to Kiev. It's the capital of the Ukraine. And they sent him to work in a leather factory where they were making boots for the Russian soldiers. And because that was his business at home, leather. And they sent my older brother, who was already 17, to fight on the front, on the Russian front against the Nazis, the Germans. Unfortunately, he was killed 2 months before the war was over. They sent my mother, my younger brother, and me to work on a collective farm in Zhytomyr in Russia, picking potatoes for the soldiers too. And we were rationed again, 1 potato a day. We worked 10, 12, 14 hours a day. Sometimes we were too exhausted to eat that potato. But one thing was nice. Nobody wanted to kill us. We didn't know how to handle it. I mean, we would see a policeman, we'd run a mile away. We were so scared of everybody, you know, because 2.5 years, everybody wanted to kill us. So that was the nicest part, because the war was still on, but no one tried to hurt us. So we didn't mind the hard work. And we stayed on that farm for a long time. In the meantime, our family was separated. My father was in Kiev. My older brother was on the Russian front someplace. And we didn't know what's going to happen. In 1945, the Russians passed a law right after the war that all Polish citizens can return to Poland. We didn't want to live under the communist regime. It wasn't good. Trust me. So we decided we'll go back to Poland, even though we didn't have a house to come to or a town to come to. But we returned to Poland, and we came to the closest city next to our town. And we came there, and to our surprise again, we found 33 survivors from our town. They had the same idea. Out of the 5,000, 33 plus us, 8. 43 people survived out of the 5,000. The rest were slaughtered. Babies, children, young, old, didn't make any difference. And we were so happy to see someone alive. And we lived there for a long time. And then some Jewish organization, and I think it was called HIAS, transported us to Austria, to a displaced persons camp, where a lot of refugees, survivors were brought from all over Europe. And we were living there for a long time. It was occupied under the by the Americans. American soldiers were wonderful to us. We were housed there, and they had a soup kitchen, they had a little social hall, and the soldiers were wonderful to us. They'd give the men cigarettes. We didn't know about cancer in those days. And they'd give us children Hershey bars. And I got addicted to chocolate. To this day, if you want to look at my purse, you'll find a candy bar. I love chocolate. Anyway, we were sitting there, waiting, living there, doing nothing. And just like the world was silent during the Holocaust, they were silent afterwards too. Nobody wanted us. We thought we'd go to Cuba, to South America, to Canada, to the United States. We couldn't go to Palestine because it was occupied by the British. They wouldn't have us. So we were sitting in a displaced persons camp, living there and waiting eventually to see what's going to happen to us. My mother had 2 sisters and a brother in Cleveland, but there was no way we could communicate until we came to the displaced persons camp. After a few months, my father decided he's going to send a telegram. to our family. Well, he was not literate in the English language, but he remembered the name, of course, Harry Abrams. And he knew they were living in Cleveland. Something with an O for Ohio. So I don't know what he wrote down on the address, but he wrote down phonetically Harry Abrams, Cleveland O. And wouldn't you know it, that Western Union received the telegram, and they were kind enough to look up in the white pages. I guess Cleveland was not as big then as it is now, or the suburbs. And they looked up Harry Abrams, and they called him, and it was the right Harry Abrams. He came and retrieved the telegram, in which we advised them that the four of us survived. By the way, we were the only family unit that survived. There was no family, like a mother and a father and children like us, even though my older brother perished. There was an orphan, there was a little girl, a boy, a man, a woman, a lady, but no family unit. We were the only ones from the entire town. And we advised them that we survived and where we were, and they sent us a visa, which meant that the government would not be responsible for us, that the family would take care of us. And in 1946, we came to the United States. And life started, life began. It was difficult at first because we came here, and eventually our family got us a little apartment. They enrolled us kids in school. I was the oldest kid in junior high school, I want you to know, because I had to learn English. And my father got him a little job. And my brother and I went to school, and we worked every single day, 7 days a week, 7 nights a week, from 4 o'clock till 9:30 in the evening. I worked in a bakery, and he worked for a caterer to help our parents out, because we didn't have anything. But we were delighted. We were so happy because nobody wanted to hurt us, and it was amazing. People can travel, people can buy, people can go wherever they want. It was hard for us to get used to the freedom, in this country. And that's, little by little, we made some progress. Eventually, I learned English a little bit. I was transferred to high school. I was not happy in high school because there were, as today, there's some, even in those days, there were some bullies. And they didn't like me. Why? I was the other. I would eat alone in the cafeteria. They laughed at me. Some. Most of them were nice, but there were some bullies. Because I didn't speak English. I wasn't well groomed. I didn't have the penny loafers and the pleated skirts and the sweaters that they had. And I was an outsider to them. But you want to know something? It didn't really affect me. I didn't like it. But I thought to myself, someday I'm going to show you. I'm going to be more than your equal. And I figured what I went through, what's there to stop me? A big deal, let them laugh at me. And so I finished school. And as most of this generation knows, in those days, not too many women went to college. And we got married young. Don't you dare. Until you get your master's. And I got married, had 3 sons, and I have 4 grandsons. I became a nursery school teacher. I went back to school and I became a nursery school teacher. I taught nursery school for 10 years. And when my boys got older, I decided that I wanted to make more money. I wanted to be more successful. And I figured, if not in America, where? The opportunities are there. All you have to do is work hard. And it's true. Well, after 10 years, I quit nursery school teaching, and I was hired. I went to work for a textile company in Cleveland, Liberty Textile. There was a decorating school in Cleveland on the west side, and I went there and took a course. And I was hired as a decorator and a salesperson. Now, I came to work in a place where there were a lot of men working there. I was hired to do the same job as they did. I didn't know the business from nothing. I told my boss, don't pay me. Give me a chance for a couple of weeks, 2-3 weeks. If I like it and you like me, and if I learn a little bit about the business, we'll talk money then. And he said, fine, good deal. I started to work, and I somehow took to it like a fish to water. I loved the business. I worked like a horse. I never clocked in or clocked out. I came early and left very, very late. And I traveled all over wherever I had to. I had a big territory. And I want you to know, and I especially want you to know, young people, I became top dog at the company. I worked for the company and I worked hard, and I want you to know I did succeed. I am not a wealthy woman, but I'm not lacking for anything. I can pay my rent, and I have everything else. I put 3 boys through college by myself because my husband died young, and I did okay in America. And you have to take advantage of opportunities. And to us, it was a privilege to be able to work and make money and, and grow and succeed. And we established ourselves, and then I retired 11 years ago, at the age of 70. I worked till I was 70 because I liked working and I liked the money. And I retired, and after retired, Steven Spielberg established the Shoah Foundation, and he sent a crew out to interview me and do a film. Until then, I never spoke about the Holocaust, not to my children, not to anybody. Or just little pieces here and there. If they wasted food, I would say, during the war, I would have it for 3 days. And they'd say, well, too bad, the war is over, Mom. So I didn't expect them to understand. I didn't expect anybody to understand what took place. And we couldn't speak about it. You wouldn't know where to start and when to finish. We kept silent for many, many years. And it wasn't until the Shoah Foundation was established. And after that interview, I didn't shut my mouth. I eventually I became a docent at the Museum of Jewish Heritage in Beechwood, Ohio. Take a bus and come there. It's really interesting. A lot of people come from all over there. And I became a docent there, and a lot of high school and college students and adults would come, and I'd give them a tour, and then I would give a talk. And this enabled me to speak to more people. And now I'm talking to anybody who's going to listen. And here I am. Why am I talking? I have decided after I retired that I will keep my town and its people's memory alive. I will do whatever I can. And I speak out to you people, and especially to you young people. You are our future. You are citizens of the world. We depend on you. We depend on you to stand up and speak up against bigotry, discrimination, hatred. We were not born to hate. It's not in our genes. We learn it, but it can be unlearned. And please, you have to stand by and say no to all those evil things. So maybe you won't have to live through a Holocaust. So maybe another Holocaust wouldn't happen. And that's why I speak. And I could talk to you for hours, but I know my time is limited. So I will stop now, except to tell you that in addition to my speaking and being a docent, I managed to organize a contact list of 185 descendants from our town. Out of all the people in our town, I'm the only survivor. And these descendants are from South America, Canada, Israel, the United States. We took a trip back to what used to be our hometown. We built a memorial on the mass graves. And then we went again, more people joined us. And the last trip was a year ago, August. And we started filming a documentary about our town and its people. It should be ready in about 3 months, and I hope you'll all get to see it. And so I've been working at this. I promised myself that I would never forget my people and the 6 million who were slaughtered. And that's what I do. I want to thank you all very, very much for inviting me. See, I was a veteran too. I was in the underground, in the Russian underground. I was fighting. And it's a pleasure to talk to you, and thank you very, very much for listening. And if you have any questions, I'll be glad to answer. Thank you so much. My pleasure.
I would like to know how you have maintained outlook through all that you've been that you have won.
I did what I had to do as time went passed by, and I came to a point in my life where, thank God, I did the correct things with my parents' guidance. And I don't know, I was a little girl. I always kind of had a nice sense of humor. I was a tomboy to start with. And I am who I am. I can't explain to you why.
Got a question over here, Diane.
Yes.
You mentioned that there was a film being made, but you didn't mention what the name of it is or where we may be able to see it in 3 months.
Yes.
Will it be coming out in the theater or at the museum?
Okay.
Where?
First of all, we published a book. My colleague in Washington, who's a scholar, did a lot of research with my help for many years, and the book is called The Heavens Are Empty. You can get it on Amazon. I think it's $12 or something. In addition to that, we're doing the documentary. The documentary takes a long time and a lot of money. So we raised as much funds as we could, and we're still soliciting for contributions. The documentary will be called The Lost Town. And it will be ready. I talked to the producer, as a matter of fact, 2 nights ago. He's in Los Angeles. And he assured me that within 3 months, in 3 months it should be ready. We'll first show it, try to market it at film festivals, and then market it to theaters. I don't know how that works, but he knows. So we'll look forward to seeing it, and I hope all of you will have the opportunity to see it. And I'm sure it'll be promoted, and I don't know how, but you'll hear about it. Let me tell you, you will hear about it. And when you see the marquee, you'll recognize, or in the paper. So we're very proud of that achievement. Yes?
Could you tell me the name of the town?
The name of the town is Trochenbrod. That's a Jewish name. And legend has it that the first settlers who came there One's name was Trochen and the other one was Brod. So they named the town Trochenbrod. In Polish, it was called Zofiówka. And it's now the Ukraine instead of Poland. Now, I don't know if any of you saw a film or read the book Everything is Illuminated by Jonathan Foer. Yeah?
Librarian, I read it.
That was about our town. That was his journey. He's a good friend of mine. He's a descendant, he's a grandchild from Trochenbrod. Very young man, he was 21 when he wrote the book. He published a few more since then. That was also about our town.
Did your husband have some of those experiences as well?
No, I married an American. No, he didn't, but he was very understanding, and he put up with all my, not going to say it. We have young children here. So, no, thank God he didn't have to go through what I did. Yes.
Where were you when you found out the war was over? How did you find out?
Well, when the Russian underground found us, the Three Horses came to us.
With any Nazis after the war?
Well, what happened when we came, no, we didn't, but when we came to the displaced persons camps in Austria, a lot of Jews who survived were very angry, and you can't blame them. And sometimes some of them who were in concentration camps would recognize a Nazi here and there, and they'd beat the heck out of them. But I personally didn't have that opportunity, no. I'd rather not.
Are your children in the area?
Question, I'm sorry. I have one son that lives in Cleveland, near me. Unfortunately, I lost two sons. I lost my oldest son 6 years ago from a pancreatitis attack. And I lost my youngest son a year ago. So I have one son and 4 grandsons. And keeping busy is what keeps me going. It doesn't get easier. But like always, I've learned to cope the best I can. But I have wonderful grandsons and a good son.
Are you in the picture?
Yeah, when I was a little girl. And you'll see me in the documentary a lot. Yes.
How old were you when you came back?
15. Yeah.
What high school did you go to?
I went to Roosevelt Junior High first, and then they transferred me to Heights High School.
Old classmate.
Really?
Graduated from Heights High.
Yeah, probably recently.
68.
68, 48. Summer school 48. I had a long, a lot to catch up. It was hard.
You were on the run for at least 3 years.
2.5 good
2.5.
years. Yes, please. Iran is right. And I lost my childhood. I lost my innocence. I lost my world. You can't recapture that. And I became an adult at the age of 11 because of the circumstances that happened. So you young people, you live in a great country with great opportunities and lots of freedom to do it with. All you have to do is set a goal for yourself and aim for it. All the best of luck to you. You can do anything you want. You can become anything you want. Trust me. If I, a greenhorn who came here, I couldn't speak, I didn't have money, nothing. And I consider myself successful. Can you imagine what you can accomplish? Don't let anybody stop you.
Thank you.